You know, sometimes life teaches you lessons in the most unexpected ways. I always believed my son was just a kid with big dreams, until the day our own neighborhood turned those dreams into a war. It all started with a letter, a simple white envelope, slipped under our front door, sealed with arrogance and power. The letter was from our homeowners association, the HOA, and inside it was a fine for my teenage son for violating community rules. Now tell me, what kind of rule could a 16-year-old possibly break that deserves a fine? He hadn't broken anyone's window. He hadn't made a mess. All he did was try to build something good. You see, my son wasn't like most kids his age. While others played games or hung out after school, he spent hours in our garage, not to waste time, but to build his small business. He called it clean sweep, a simple idea. He'd wash driveways, mow lawns, and help neighbors with small chores for a few dollars. He wanted to buy his first car with his own money, not mine, and I admired that. But the HOA, they didn't like it one bit. One morning, my son came running inside, face pale, voice shaking. "Dad," he said, "they're saying I can't run my business here. They're saying it breaks HOA rules." I took the letter from his hand, and when I read it, my blood boiled. They were fining him $500 for operating a business on residential property without HOA approval. $500. For mowing lawns, for cleaning driveways, for working hard. I looked at my son and I could see the heartbreak in his eyes. He thought he was doing something good. He thought people would be proud of him. But instead, he was being punished for it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how unfair the world can be, how sometimes the ones who try the hardest get hit the hardest. I wanted to protect him, but more than that, I wanted him to learn something powerful from this moment. So the next morning I told him, "Son, don't let small people with big power stop your dreams. We'll fight this the right way." He nodded, and that's when something changed in his eyes. That's the moment he stopped being just my boy. That's the moment he became something more. From that day, he started reading everything he could about HOAs, property laws, and business rights. He stayed up late watching videos, studying online, even emailing lawyers to understand how HOAs worked. He wasn't angry anymore, and he was focused. And that scared the HOA more than anything. You see, the people in charge of our HOA were used to control. They liked power. They liked telling people what to do. But now, they had no idea what kind of storm was coming for them, because they had just picked a fight with the wrong teenager. Weeks passed. The HOA kept sending letters. They added more fines, each one nastier than the last. Failure to comply. Continued business activity. Violation of Section 14B. They even threatened to put a lien on our house. That's when my son smiled. Yes, smiled, and said something I'll never forget. He said, "Dad, they want to play business? Let's play business." That night, he opened his laptop and showed me something. He had been saving every dollar he earned. He'd been investing a little online, and he had made more money than I ever expected. He said, "What if I told you I could buy the HOA?" I laughed at first, but he wasn't joking. He had done his research. He found out that the HOA's management company was actually a private entity, and it was up for renewal. He was going to make an offer. I didn't know whether to be proud or terrified. But I watched as my son, my teenage son, turned what started as a punishment into a power move that would change everything. And that's where the story truly begins. Because when the HOA tried to crush his dream, he didn't just fight back. He bought their power. He became the boss of the very people who tried to destroy him. But what happened next was something no one could have seen coming. It wasn't just about money anymore. It became about principle, pride, and justice. And if you think the HOA was ready to bow down to a teenager, you're about to see just how wrong they were. The morning after that decision, the air in our house felt different. There was a quiet confidence in my son's eyes, like he already knew he was walking into a battle and he was ready to win it. He wasn't angry anymore. He was calm, patient, and focused. And that calm was what scared me the most. He had grown beyond his years. He no longer spoke like a 16-year-old. He spoke like someone who had been through fire and come out sharper. He sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "Dad, I've got a plan. But you have to trust me." I nodded. He opened his laptop, and there it was, a spreadsheet full of numbers, names, and connections. He had mapped out the entire HOA board, every member, their background, their votes, even who liked who and who didn't. It looked like something out of a detective movie. "Son," I asked, "what are you doing with all this?" He smiled and said, "I'm learning how they work, Dad. You can't beat power unless you understand how power moves." Those words hit me hard, because that was exactly what life had taught me too. Only I learned it at 40, and here he was, learning it at 16. Over the next few weeks, he began showing up at HOA meetings. He wasn't loud. He wasn't rude. He just listened. He took notes. He asked calm, smart questions. And soon, even the board members started noticing him. At first, they thought he was just some curious kid. But slowly, they realized he was learning faster than they could handle. One day, the HOA president, a man named Mr. Randall, who loved rules more than kindness, finally confronted him. In front of everyone, he said, "Young man, this is a private meeting. You shouldn't even be here." And my son, with a polite smile, said, "Sir, I live here. I pay HOA fees, and according to your bylaws, any resident can attend public sessions. I'm just here to learn." The room went silent. Even Mr. Randall didn't have a comeback. That night, when my son came home, I saw something glowing in his eyes, not arrogance, but quiet victory. He was learning how to stand tall in a world that tried to push him down. Then came the turning point. He found out that the HOA's management contract, the one that handled all their paperwork, payments, and fines, was about to expire. It had to be renewed by vote, or else another company could take over. That's when my son made his move. He contacted a local business consultant, someone he met through a small entrepreneurship forum online. With his savings and a small investment from a mentor, he created a new property management startup. He called it Next Step Living Co. He filed the papers, registered the business, built a website, and even hired a few part-time employees, older people who knew how to handle HOA operations. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was building. The HOA had no idea what was coming. A week before the renewal vote, my son mailed every resident in the neighborhood a letter, polite, simple, and professional. It explained how Next Step Living Co. could handle HOA management better, with more transparency, lower fees, and fair treatment for all residents. The letter didn't attack anyone. It just offered something better, and when those letters hit mailboxes, people started whispering. For the first time, residents began to question the HOA's power. Old neighbors who had been silent for years started speaking up about unfair fines, unnecessary rules, and the arrogance of the board. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Mr. Randall was furious. He called my son's actions disrespectful and illegal. But by then it was too late. The community was listening to my son, not to him. The night of the vote was unforgettable. The room was packed. Every seat taken, every eye watching. My son stood up, straightened his tie, and spoke. His voice didn't shake. His hands didn't tremble. He said, "I'm not here to fight anyone. I'm here to remind everyone that this neighborhood belongs to all of us. We deserve fairness, respect, and freedom to grow. We don't need fear. We need trust." There was silence. And then, applause. One by one, people started voting. And the unthinkable happened. Next Step Living Co., his company, won the management contract. My teenage son had just bought control of the HOA. That night, when we got home, I couldn't speak for a while. I just looked at him and thought, this boy didn't just win. He grew up. He hugged me and whispered, "Dad, they tried to fine me for working hard. Now, I'll make sure no kid in this neighborhood ever gets punished for doing something good." That moment, that promise, was worth more than any victory. But of course, not everyone was happy. Mr. Randall and his board weren't done yet. They had power, pride, and plenty of tricks left up their sleeves. The next morning, we woke up to new letters, legal ones. Threats of audits, accusations of conflict of interest, and even attempts to block my son's management contract. They wanted to scare him. They wanted to crush him before he could even begin. But what they didn't know was that this kid had something stronger than fear. He had truth. He had integrity. And he had a community starting to believe in him. He went door to door, not as a businessman, but as a neighbor. He listened to people's problems. He offered small solutions. He built trust, one handshake at a time. Slowly, the community began to shift. The same people who once ignored the HOA's unfair rules started standing beside my son. The same streets that once felt divided started feeling alive again. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about a teenager winning against power. It was about a community rediscovering its heart. Still, I knew this wasn't over. People like Mr. Randall don't give up easily. And my son was about to learn that real power doesn't just come from ownership. It comes from how you handle enemies when you finally have the upper hand. You'd think the story would end there, right? A young boy wins against a powerful HOA, the community celebrates, and everyone lives happily ever after. But life doesn't work like that. When pride is hurt, power fights back. And that's exactly what happened next. The very next week, my son started receiving letters. Not one, not two, but a whole pile of them. Each one stamped in red, bold words across the top. Urgent legal notice. The old HOA board had decided to challenge his new management contract in court. Their reason? They claimed he was too young, unqualified, and in violation of association bylaws. It was all just an excuse. They couldn't stand the fact that a teenager had outsmarted them. I remember walking into his room that evening. He was sitting by his desk, the same old wooden desk where he used to do his homework. Only now it was covered with legal papers, printouts, and a cup of cold coffee. He looked tired but not broken. "Son," I said softly, "maybe it's time to let this go. They've got money, lawyers, and connections. You're still a kid." He turned his head slowly and said something that sent chills down my spine. "Dad, they think my age is a weakness, but maybe it's my strength." He wasn't fighting for pride anymore. He was fighting for principle. That night, he called an emergency meeting with the community. Over 60 people showed up. Men, women, retired couples, single parents. People who had lived under that HOA's pressure for years. He stood before them, wearing his same clean white shirt and speaking from his heart. He said, "They want me to back down because I'm young. But if I give up now, they'll keep doing this to the next family and the next. It's not about me anymore. It's about us." You could feel the energy in that room shift. Old folks were nodding. People who had never spoken before started raising their hands, offering to help. And that's when something powerful happened. The community united. They volunteered their time. One man was a retired lawyer. He offered to help with the case. Another woman had years of accounting experience. She began reviewing the HOA's old finances. And what they found was shocking. Hidden deep inside the records were missing funds, unexplained expenses, and transactions that didn't make sense. Thousands of dollars had disappeared over the years, quietly swept under the rug. And guess who had signed most of those checks? Mr. Randall. When my son saw that, he didn't smile. He just sighed and said, "This isn't about revenge anymore, Dad. It's about justice." He gathered all the evidence, neatly documented everything, and sent it to the county authorities. Within weeks, the investigation began. Mr. Randall, who once walked around like he owned the neighborhood, now avoided everyone's eyes. He stopped attending meetings. His arrogance slowly melted into fear, and yet my son didn't celebrate. He stayed humble. He told me one evening, "Dad, I don't want to destroy anyone. I just want people to be treated fairly." That's when I realized he wasn't just my son anymore. He was a leader, a real one. But the battle wasn't over. Mr. Randall wasn't ready to give up his control. He began spreading rumors, whispering lies that my son was manipulating people, that he wanted to make money off the HOA. Some people started doubting again. Old habits die hard. I saw my boy come home one night, exhausted and quiet. He sat down, took off his shoes, and just stared at the floor. When I asked what was wrong, he said, Dad, no matter how good you try to be, some people will still hate you for it. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "That's life, son. You don't do the right thing because it's easy. You do it because it's right." He nodded slowly, and that's when something changed again. He found his strength. The next morning, he called another community meeting. This time, he spoke differently, stronger, firmer, but still respectful. He said, "I know some people think I'm doing this for myself. But look around. Are your fees lower now? Are your fines fairer? Are your voices finally being heard? That's why I'm here. Not for me. For all of us. And you know what?" People clapped again. Not the slow, polite kind of clapping, but real, emotional applause from people who finally felt free to speak. That day, the tide turned again. The same neighbors who had doubted him now stood beside him. They started volunteering for small committees, helping clean the park, repainting the community walls, and fixing what had been broken for years. The neighborhood was changing, not because of money or rules, but because of hope. Meanwhile, the investigation against Mr. Randall kept growing. Within months, he was found guilty of mismanaging HOA funds and falsifying records. He was forced to resign. His power was gone, and just like that, when the news broke, I looked at my son. He didn't cheer. He just closed his eyes and whispered, "It's over." But I could tell, deep down, it wasn't just relief. It was sadness, too, because no matter how right you are, watching someone fall, even someone who hurt you, never feels good. That night, we sat on the porch together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and orange. He said, "Dad, I never wanted to win against him. I just wanted him to listen." Those words, they stayed with me, because that's the kind of heart he had, firm but kind. From that day on, he ran the HOA with honesty and transparency. Every meeting was open to the public. Every budget was shared openly. Every fine had a reason, and people respected that. The funny thing, the same people who once feared the HOA started loving it again. It wasn't about rules anymore, and it was about community. And you know what moved me the most? Every time someone asked him how he managed to do all this at such a young age, he'd just smile and say, "Because they told me I couldn't." Months passed. The neighborhood started to thrive again. People planted flowers, kids played in the park, and for the first time in years, everyone greeted each other with warmth. My son had done something rare. He turned power into peace. One evening, I asked him, "So, what's next for you?" He smiled and said, "I want to teach other young people how to stand up for themselves, not with anger, but with knowledge." That's when I realized something beautiful. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about growth, about the strength of character, about how a young man taught an entire community that kindness, courage, and patience are stronger than fear and control. And to this day, every time I walk through our quiet neighborhood, I can still see him mowing a lawn, helping a neighbor, or just talking to the elderly couple across the street. No arrogance, no pride, just a young man with a good heart who turned a fine into a future. It's strange, isn't it? How something so small, a fine, a piece of paper, can start a story that changes lives forever. Sometimes life doesn't give you grand beginnings. Sometimes it gives you a problem and waits to see what kind of person you'll become because of it. For my son, that fine wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of everything. Months turned into years, and our neighborhood transformed before our eyes. The lawns were greener. The streets were cleaner. But more than that, the people were closer. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in a decade were now sharing coffee on their porches, and all because one boy refused to be silent when he was told to stop trying. Every Sunday, my son still held open meetings, not in big halls or fancy offices, but in the park, under the same tree where he used to sit as a kid, dreaming of owning his first car. Now he sat there listening to the concerns of elderly residents, helping new families understand rules, and reminding everyone that the HOA wasn't a threat, it was a team. He had built something rare, trust. The same people who once saw the HOA as a cage now saw it as a circle of care. One afternoon, I watched him talking with an old man named Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins was 78 years old, kind, gentle, and always worried about late fees because he lived on a fixed income. My son sat beside him and said softly, "You've paid your dues for years, sir. You've kept this place beautiful. Don't worry about the late fee. You've earned grace." The old man smiled and said, "You remind me of the son I never had." I saw my boy lower his head for a moment, trying not to show tears. And right then I knew this wasn't just about buildings or lawns anymore. It was about people. It was about dignity. Time moved on, and his small management company, Next Step Living Commerce, started growing beyond our neighborhood. Other communities began to call him. They wanted the same kind of fairness, the same heart. He never bragged. He never chased fame. He just worked hard, listened deeply, and built something meaningful. I remember one night, we were sitting together on the porch again, just like old times. He was quiet, watching the stars. I asked, "Do you ever think about how it all started?" He smiled gently and said, "Yeah, I think about that first letter sometimes. The one that told me I couldn't do something. I think about how angry I felt. But if that hadn't happened, Dad, maybe I'd never have found my purpose." He paused for a moment and added, "Sometimes life's unfairness is the seed of your destiny." I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, realizing that my little boy had grown into a man with wisdom far beyond his years. But not everything was easy. With growth came challenges, competition, criticism, and pressure. Some said he got lucky. Others said he didn't deserve success at his age. And yet he stayed grounded. He'd always tell me, "People can doubt your success, Dad, but they can never erase your sincerity." And that's what kept him going. He started mentoring other teens, teaching them about entrepreneurship, honesty, and courage. He told them, "You don't have to be rich to make a difference. You just have to care enough to start." Every time I watched him speak, I could see the same fire in his eyes, the same spark that once built a lawn-cleaning business in our garage. But now, that spark lit up other hearts too. Years later, something beautiful happened. Our HOA, once a source of fear and tension, celebrated its 10-year anniversary under his management. People gathered in the park, families brought food, and laughter filled the air. There was music, dancing, and speeches. At the end of the evening, they called my son to the stage. He stood there, humble as ever, holding the same smile that had carried him through every battle. He said, "When I was 16, I got fined for trying to work hard. They told me I was breaking rules. But what I've learned is that sometimes rules need to be rewritten, not with anger, but with understanding. Because real communities aren't built by rules. They're built by people who care." The crowd went silent, and then applause thundered through the night. Some people had tears in their eyes. Even Mr. Randall, who had once been his enemy, stood quietly at the back, clapping with pride. After the speech, Mr. Randall walked up to him and said, "You turned this place into something I couldn't. You made it human again. I'm proud of you." And just like that, the story came full circle. No hatred, no revenge, just forgiveness. That night, as we walked home, the sky was dark but full of stars. I said, "Son, I think you've finally taught this place what real leadership looks like." He smiled and said, "No, Dad. The people taught me. They taught me that real power isn't about control. It's about compassion." I couldn't say anything after that. I just looked at him. My boy, my pride, my teacher. You know, as a father, you dream that your children will do better than you did. But when you actually see it happen, when you see them rise above anger, turn pain into purpose, and build something good, it humbles you. And that's what he did. He didn't just buy the HOA. He rebuilt it with heart. He turned a story of punishment into a story of purpose. He turned enemies into allies. He turned control into care. And most of all, he showed us that one small act of courage, even from a teenager, can ripple through an entire community. Even today, when I walk down our quiet street and see the lights glowing softly in every window, I remember how it all began. A fine, a fight, and a boy who refused to quit. Every life lesson, every tear, every late night he spent reading laws and rules. It all led to this peace, this harmony, this home. And sometimes, when I sit on my porch at dusk, I can still hear his voice echoing through the years. Dad, they told me I couldn't, so I did. That's not just his story. That's a story for every person who has ever been told they're not enough, for every dreamer who has been told to stop, for every good heart punished for trying too hard. Because when you keep your head high, stay kind, and fight with grace, even the world's harshest voices can't silence your truth.